So your shorts say NASA. Do you mind if I show your shorts in my video?
Yeah.
They are awesome, man. And it's got a NASA logo in the front. Alright, hello everybody. Today's date is September 5th, 2021. And this video is being made in order to describe the photonic signal processing along the neural gaps. The photonic signal processing within neurotransmitters along the synaptic gaps of your neuronal activity related to neural pathways and neural networks. This video is being made in order to expose how nanotech can act as a bioamplifier in order to decode the more complex information that is related to the information that is being that is part of the neurotransmitter. Give you a fast example about that. Let's say you're at a grocery store or at a restaurant or a movie theater, and you notice a situation unfolding before your eyes. Nothing to do with you, it's just a situation unfolding before your eyes. And you're witnessing two human beings interact with each other, whether it be an incident where two people are not getting along, or whether it be just a long-term kind of conversation where the statements in the conversations seem a little bit complex. So when they're observing this, and they're processing auditorily what they're hearing related to what's said, the brain processes this information through what is known as syntax. Syntax is how language is processed in the left brain through the neurotransmitters. So as the neurotransmitters are traveling along the synaptic gap within the neural network that is the brainwave, that is processing what they're hearing auditorily, what the nanotech will do is act as a bioencoder by amplifying the electrical charges within the photonic signals as this information is being processed along the synaptic gap, so that its decoding and interpreting capabilities can be distinguished more pertaining to when the nanotech is decoding the information as it's traveling along the synaptic gap within the neurotransmitters. That same function is being sent back to the satanic rats who are interfacing with the nanotech. One of the main goals of gang stalking is information extraction non-consensually from the victim. As a direct result of these satanic filthy whores intentionally, non-consensually putting this type of technology in a gang stalking victim's brain without their consent and even without them knowing about it. So the nanotech acts as a bioamplifier, so it can act as an interpreter pertaining to the more complex variables of the content of the conversation that the victim is witnessing, the conversation that's propped up around them. As a direct result, the photonic signals, from the complex information is interpreted by the nanotech and sent back to the computer, brain-to-computer interface. So in gang stalking crimes, these little sick, filthy, mass murdering, human trafficking, raping, gang raping whores who participate in this crime, who non-consensually put this type of nanotech in a gang stalking victim's brain, who then becomes a non-stop, non-consensual human experimentation subject, is forced to endure massive amounts of visual and verbal props propped up around them along their routes, including where they live. You should also research the fact that tens of thousands of gang stalking victims are also reporting that they're enduring a specific type of sound tech, that is propped up, that is used on, reported to be used on tens of thousands of these same victims. That sound tech can be, but not limited to, voice to skull, silent sound spread spectrum, holosonics, what else do we got? ELF broadcasting. And so as a direct result of the human brain through bone conduction and ultrasonic sound bone conduction, when the human brain hears what is perpetrated through people and or sound tech, it is also being forced to interpret the complex variables, the complex content of what's being said. The same thing when it comes to visual. So as a direct result, again, the nanotech acts as a bioencoder as a result of it amplifying the photonic signal, frequency output of the photonic signal that is transferring the information that the victim hears. As a direct result, they are able to then interpret, not only the complex variables that are associated to whatever the victim is perceiving through their eyes and ears, but they're also able to see how it plays within the entire processing of the brain wave and its eventual potentiated frequency output from it. Have you ever wondered why, when you research at Google and YouTube, when a gang stalking victim is forced to endure identical to a T physical props, color coding, okay, identical verbal harassment, identical sound props? That is because whenever the brain is perceiving pattern recognition, the brain is going to interpret those variables. Now, as the brain is interpreting these variables, complex information can also be incorporated within that prop, like a staged event against the victim. Okay? And so when the brain is seeing the prop, it excites the brain wave that the prop is connected to. This is prior entrainment that occurred to the victim, visual and auditorial. So whenever, like, so say if you got a victim who's been sensitized to the color red or black and white, okay, as a direct result of this crime, intentionally propping that up on an extremely frequent basis, the victim becomes aware that it's being propped up intentionally. There's the correlation to the victim to the crime. The brain recognizes it. It then creates what is known as a visual entrained pathway. Every single time the victim continues to be forced to see it, it reinforces that entrained pathway, causing the resulting potentiated frequency output from it to become extremely potentiated. Therefore, whenever the victim continues to see it, it will not take much for that potentiated frequency output to fire. And as a direct result, remote neural monitoring can identify it, send a modulated frequency to it, and nearly hack the victim in real time. My fellow American citizens, welcome to gang stalking.
System is designed to do. There are a lot of things that they're doing. Basically, understand that there are key words involved that help a person understand how the technology is being deployed against them. It's a fabricated and falsified stream of energy. It contains data, okay? And any set of brainwaves can be remotely captured from the victim and then constantly held and perpetually replayed in the victim's brain. So what they're doing is they're using the victim's own memories against the victim. Captures a set of brainwaves from you, okay, memories, emotions, sensations. It captures that, and then it injects it repeatedly. The technology is designed, the supercomputer is designed, is programmed to remotely capture random bits of your senses, and then to inject, to first fabricate stories and mental suggestions. These are called thought-triggered attacks. At speed of light, to fabricate these mental suggestions, inject it back into the subconscious of the victim, to interrogate the victim, to mentally interrogate the victim, to harass, to distract, to torture the victim into submission to the system's influence. So it's all a deadly game of deception and manipulation. The entire technology can be summed up in one sentence. CIA and DoD mind control technologies can really be summed up in one sentence. It is a deadly game of deception and manipulation, nothing more. Based on that model, hybrid game theory, one of them.
Okay, all right, let me ask you a question. The individual TIs who are being gang stalked, hyper-gamed, they are, I assume, beta tests. This is being done to gather data on how to apply it to the masses all at once. Correct? They're learning. We're in the process where they're building their entire infrastructure to run the whole human race at some point.
Correct. It's being scaled up to cover all 318 million Americans, obviously.
Right.
At some point, that's the picture. But organized stalking is simple to understand. Okay? If you just understand it's based on one thing and one thing only: choice, reference, patterns. The choice, reference, patterns of the victim. What are choice references? They're memories, previous memories. Okay, what are patterns? They're a pattern of the previous memories of the victim. It's called choice reference patterns. So they basically profile the victim. They build a profile of the composition habits of the victim. And then based on those previous choice references of the victim, they begin to station the organized stalkers at various vantage points. So based on those previous choices, where they know the victim is going to go, okay? Because of the victim's memory. Remember, they're targeting your memory and thought process. Mind control technologies are designed to interfere with the memory and thought process. So the organized stalking is based off that premise: choice, reference, patterns. They're going to target you with organized stalking based on your previous choices at those locations, your favorite cafes. In order to understand organized stalking, you have to go back favorite bars, your favorite, modes of transportation, etc. Okay? And then once you understand that organized stalking is based on one thing, choice, reference, patterns, you must understand what it's comprised of, and that's two things. Based on one thing, choice, reference, patterns, but comprised of two things. And that's situational scenarios and conversational scenarios. In those situational and conversational scenarios, street theater, okay, mind game, will always be based on events or topics that they know will capture the victim's attention. So the organized stalking is designed to force the victim to respond. Remember, each response trying to overcome the organized stalking, each force adjustment away from the harassment is a synaptic response, an evoked potential in your brain, which can be remotely measured with a supercomputer and integrated back into ORM data as the supercomputer continues to build a cognitive model of your brain and central nervous system. That's organized stalking. That's the simple definition of it.
Alright, we got it. Very good.
Okay? So, the stream, it's important to understand the stream. The stream, based off your brainwave signature, okay, basically it says fabricated or falsified. When I say a fabricated or falsified stream, what I mean is fabricated are your own previous memories, your own previous brainwave patterns, your own previous sets of brainwaves. This is copied and coded and injected.
Alright, there's a short break. Hold on.
Right there, because I gotta turn off the phone here. These fucking maggots they've been targeting me non-stop for the last 2.5 fucking hours.
Let me fast forward it.
And for the last 4 it's been taking it off YouTube.
With a newer programming, for example.
Can we rewind it just for a second?
Correct. It's being scaled up to cover all 318 million Americans, obviously. At some point, that's the picture. But organized stalking is simple to understand, okay? If you just understand it's based on one thing and one thing only, choice, that's the picture. But organized stalking is simple to understand, okay? If you just understand it's based on one thing and one thing only, choice, reference, patterns. The choice, reference, patterns of the victim. What are choice references? They're memories, previous memories. Okay, what are patterns? They're a pattern of the previous memories of the victim. It's called choice, reference, patterns. So they basically profile the victim. They build a profile of the composition habits of the victim. And then based on those previous choice references of the victim, they begin to station the organized stalkers at various vantage points. So based on those previous choices, where they know the victim is going to go, okay? Because of the victim's memory. Remember, they're targeting your memory and thought process. Mind control technologies are designed to interfere with the memory and thought process. So the organized stalking is based off that premise. Choice, reference, patterns. They're going to target you with organized stalking based on your previous choices at those locations, your favorite cafes. In order to understand organized stalking, you have to go back and look at a pattern of your previous choices. Your favorite restaurants, your favorite bars, your favorite, modes of transportation, etc. Okay? And then once you understand that organized stalking is based on one thing, choice, reference, patterns, you must understand what it's comprised of, and that's two things. Based on one thing, choice, reference, patterns, but comprised of two things. And that's situational scenarios and conversational scenarios. In those situational and conversational scenarios, street theater, okay, mind game, will always be based on events or topics that they know will capture the victim's attention. So the organized stalking is designed to force the victim to respond. Remember, each response trying to overcome the organized stalking, each force adjustment away from the harassment is a synaptic response, an evoked potential in your brain, which can be remotely measured with a supercomputer and integrated back into ORM data as the supercomputer continues to build a cognitive model of your brain and central nervous system. That's organized stalking. That's the simple definition of it.
Alright, we got it. Very good.
Okay? So, the stream, it's important to understand the stream. The stream, based off your brainwave signature, okay, basically it says fabricated or falsified. When I say a fabricated or falsified stream, what I mean is fabricated are your own previous memories, your own previous brainwave patterns, your own previous sets of brainwaves. This is copied and coded and injecting perpetually back into your subconscious. That's fabricated. Falsified are those brainwaves, those memories, for example, emotions, etc. The supercomputer was able to layer in with the newer programming, for example. the dream modulation, the neurolinguistic programming, etc. So they layer these in at night. Organized stalking is necessary to determine, engage, and measure the effectiveness of their technology.
Okay, so to measure the effectiveness of their technology, so let's take a fast look at this. Whenever a human being is perceiving that their mind and or body is under some type of threatening attack, or if they're in an environment that has been known to prop up things that can then lead to a situation that can then produce a negative effect for the victim, that's what gang stalking does in part. It creates these negative, hostile environments, and then throughout the continued applied program, what it will do is it will stage events. And then the victim can be banned from a place like a grocery store, or they can have their ability to continue to charge their chargers taken away, which they use for their phone, and their phone is used to assist in possibly keeping them safe. That's another subject matter. I'll talk about that again in future videos. So they already know all these circumstances that they put the victim in and how the victim has responded to it, and then they interject the program within those circumstances. In order to, because a lot of brain entrainment takes place from the limbic system, which is responsible for self-preservation, which is why gang stalking will intentionally prop up so many different things in this crime to make the victim feel threatened. Threatened physically, threatened financially, threatened concerning their property, threatened concerning arrests, tickets, assaults, property thefts, robberies, rapes, anything and everything. Gang stalking has many ways that they can convey these messages to the victim and then repeat them and then act on them, so that when they are acted upon, it becomes a memory. And the memory now has a reference because of the things that were said and done before the attack are repeated during the attack. Because gang stalking needs to anchor that in the victim's mind so that the memory reference can be created. That way, when any similar thing is propped up in the future, it will stimulate that memory reference that is attached to the entrained pathway, which is why you have so much identical repetition in gang stalking. And then that way, whenever the same stimuli that was associated to the assault and to the prior harassment that led up for days and days and days and days and days, that they then, like say if they put up people on your route to repeat, oh my God, every single day, everywhere you go, including where you live. Okay, like if you sit out on your front porch or you have your living room window open, they'll go by and say, oh my God. Then they'll stage the brutal physical robbery of the victim. And as the robbery's taking place, they'll repeat, oh my God. Then on subsequent dates, they'll have people propped up around the victim and say, oh my God. So what happens during this is that the brain is creating an auditorial resonance brain entrainment brainwave. And the word, oh my God, and then it also gets created to a disassociated state that the brain went into during the robbery, while oh my God was being said. So now what we got is an auditorial brain entrained pathway to the limbic system, which is responsible for self-preservation, because this crime intentionally lets you know you're being stalked, absolutely, and purposely for these purposes, because they got to have you identify it. They got to force you to see the pattern recognition. So, because when the brain is interpreting everything it takes in through its senses, and the props are propped up randomly, which Brian 2 discussed, then the brain is going to immediately interpret it, and that's where the nanotech becomes into play at, the bioamplifier between the synaptic gaps. Because if you went to Google and typed in at Google EEG, ABCDE, EEG, visual and auditorial pattern recognition, you're going to eventually run across some websites that will show you that if you went to a hospital and hooked your brain up to an EEG machine and you were shown pictures of black and white, red, green and white, your brain, certain functions within your brain would interpret those patterns, those visual patterns. If you were hooked up to the same machine and a doctor played a tape recorder of an identical word or phrase being said, the brain would interpret that because it's got a pattern connected to it. So the EEG readout will produce it. But what the EEG machine won't do is decipher and show the waves of the brain transferring more complex information that might be associated to an act that's got those type of visual representations and verbal representations associated to it. That's where the nanotech comes into play at. Because the nanotech is put within the brain and is pre-programmed to go into the barrier of the brain along the synaptic gaps so that when the more complex attributes are propped up during the staged events and the staged harassment, they can be more easily interpreted, and then that data gets sent back to them. They harvest it through remote neural monitoring. And that is one of the main purposes of the community-based harassment connected to gang stalking crimes. Absolutely. Once they create multiple brain entrained pathways and neural networks, they can easily excite them just by propping up the props that are associated to them, causing the potentiated frequency output from them to fire. Remote neural monitoring can then latch onto the victim neurally in real time in order to neurally influence behavior during a staged event. And you should also know one of the main reported conduits for remote neural monitoring is what? Fucking Wi-Fi. If you ever go into any business plaza, and stand inside or outside of that business plaza and you turn on your phone, say if it's some type of grocery store or a well-known coffee shop, and you turn on your phone right outside that coffee shop, you're going to see their Wi-Fi right there, outside of the building. Why do you think so much gang stalking is going on at entrances and exits of businesses? Because Wi-Fi range is still outside of businesses. Inside too. Absolutely. So, my fellow American citizens, one thing that these sick, filthy, mass murdering, human trafficking, raping, gang raping whores who host this crime, you should research all alphabet agencies to gang stalking, as well as fusion centers, the militaries, hospitals, universities, state, county, and local police, because I just don't give a shit concerning exposing these wild whores for what they are. They had no right to come into my life in any measure. Not 1 millimeter did they have the right to come into my life in any measure. They did not have the right to commit 1 second of one crime against me, my person, my credit, my finances, my relationships. They had no right whatsoever to come into my life in any way, shape, or form, not even an inch, not even one event. They had no right. They believe they had the right because it's obvious they have this pathology because they're doing it to hundreds of thousands of victims. See, we are all human beings. As a direct result of our God-given rights, our right to inherently be able to protect our own self, our minds, our body, our choices. Yeah, research voices called with voice morphine. They can influence you to do any fucking thing so they can set you up, including for DUIs. Okay? When you got wild, sadistic, wild, filthy whore maggots running this shit, and they are connected to the most extreme human rights abuses known to man in the entire history of the family, of the human family, literally. This is the worst crime that has ever been perpetrated in the entire history of the human family. Literally. Okay? Because consider the concept of what it's like to be an American. Consider the concept of what it's like to be a human. Everybody wants to be free. Free of people victimizing you. Free to make your own choices. Free to self-determination concerning your own future. Free to feel like you get up and have a right to find your own mate. One that's not intentionally put in your life to meet, date, marry, and go to bed with. Research social infiltration and gang stalking. So filthy whores who sit back and say, damn, we got this technology. Look at the money we can make off it by exploiting human beings. And we don't have to give a flying fuck who we hurt, or how we hurt them, or how bad, or how long. Would you want somebody imposed on your life in that way with that type of attitude and that type of pathology? Okay? Who also then starts to and endlessly continues to torture you through electromagnetic weapons, ultrasonic sound, bone conduction, directed energy weapons attacks, staged rapes. Would you want these type of people in your fucking life? You ask the average American citizen and they would say, hell no, get the hell away from me, no way in hell. Well, that's literally their pathology. We will do anything we want to anybody we want at any time for as long as we want. And there ain't a damn thing you can do about it. That is literally how they think, feel, and act on a daily basis. So if you want to get a fast pictorial representation in your mind pertaining to how information is processed along the brain waves and the synaptic gap, all you got to do is sit back and get one of those old typewriters. Okay? listen to this. If you got an old typewriter, if you went on Google and you've seen how an old typewriter works, the old typewriters used to have a little ball. And then when you press a key on the typewriter board, the ball would spin until it arrived at that until it arrived at that letter on the ball, and that letter would then be facing the paper. And then it would hit the paper. So if you press K, the ball would spin into its right ratio position until the K faced the paper, and then it would hit the paper, and then the K would appear on the paper. Well, when your brain is processing neurotransmitters, and it's processing dialogue, when it's processing visual images, it's almost the same concept. Photonic signals, spin ratios, what they do is they transfer this information by and through photonic signals and phonetic signals. Photonic are visual, okay, but they can also hold auditorial, and phonetic is audio. And what are the two main things remote neural monitoring monitors concerning the two of the five senses of a human being? Eyes and ears. Absolutely. Eyes and ears. So again, if you went to Google and you typed in EEG, auditorial and visual processing, and you did some thorough research into that, you will see that EEG machines are very limited in being able to decipher and decode the brain processes when your brain is hooked up to an EEG machine, when it's being shown certain visual images that have patterns to them. Black and white, okay? Blue and white, lavender and white, okay? So when the brain, research color coding in gang stalking. So when the brain recognizes the pattern, okay, the brain knows that this is related to color coding connected to gang stalking, and then it stimulates that already entrained pathway, that visual entrained pathway that was created by and through when the victim became sensitized to it. Research the sensitization method of gang stalking. Same thing between repeated words, phrases, sounds, and so on. How you girls doing today? So if you were to sit and have your brain hooked up to an EEG machine and you were shown black and white, red and white, blue and white, lavender and white, okay, your brain would start to recognize the patterns, and it would then emit a specific frequency output connected to that visual brain wave processing the images. But if you have a staged event perpetrated through this crime where the perpetrators are wearing black and white shoes, black and white hat, okay, black and white purse, or black and white is propped up in the environment right by the person who's squaring off on you, your brain is going to interpret every single thing that is part of and a makeup of the event. Now that's where the more complex decoding takes place at within this event. That's what the nanotech is used for, the bioamplifiers, so it can sit back and decode and interpret every single thing that is going on within the event, because it needs to interpret the more complex information connected to the attributes of the event. And this is another reason why gang stalking victims are being subject to hostile environments, staged events, and so on and so forth. The satanic, filthy whores who are hosting this crime are literally nothing but mass murdering animals. It's all they are. It's all they'll ever be. They're never going to be anything except for what they are right now, and all of the other worst things that are reported about them. They're never going to be anything except for what they are. They're making tens of billions of dollars off this crime by victimizing hundreds of thousands of victims every year in America. The vast majority of them don't even know they're a gang stalking target. So wouldn't you want information, knowledge about these criminally insane whores, so that you would know what to look out for, so you would not get suckered into and blindsided by these wild whores? And by the way, in closing, and please excuse my descriptive language, in closing, consider this well. You should also research how victims of gang stalking are having other implants put in them. Brain implants, stimulated responsive implants, bladder and bowel implants, EMG implants, stimulated responsive implants, brain implants, ear implants, eye lens implants, everything. Because they got to be able to have that stuff that they're interfacing with for other information decoding purposes. If you move your leg and you go to step off right here, they're decoding what electrophysiological signals are needed in order to commit that act. Why? Because when they see the central nervous system process it and the brain interpret it, They then take that research data and sell it to research groups who might be creating what? Prosthetic limbs for legs. Research machine learning and neural encoding and neural networks. Because the data that's being privately extracted from victims as a result of these types of implants being put in them is sold to massive amounts of research groups while the victim is left penniless, homeless, exploited in the worst ways that you can imagine, while these filthy whores are taking data from the victim as a result of the victim being non-consensually implanted. They're making millions of dollars off one victim, literally. Okay? So this is the depth and measure of these wild satanic rats for what they literally are. And trust me when I say tens of thousands of victims are all over the internet calling them the same thing. Everybody have a good day. Today's date is 9/5/2021. I made this video to inform, to expose truth so that we can understand, know, become educated so we know what to look out for. Research my descriptions and you will see truth.